The sleek black starship cut through the shimmering atmosphere of Crystara. Like a knife through silk, Dex Thorne gripped the controls with steady hands, his dark eyes fixed on the crystalline spires that rose from the planet's surface like frozen lightning. After 3 years of following dead-end leads and false promises, he had finally found it, the legendary world of the Starfire Gem, and more importantly, the palace of Queen Velana. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Nira's voice crackled through the calm system from the ship's navigation bay. "The stories about this place, they're not exactly encouraging." Dex allowed himself a slight smile as he guided the ship between two massive crystal formations. "Since when have scary stories ever stopped us? Besides, we've come too far to turn back now." The palace materialized before them as they crested the final ridge, a breathtaking structure of living crystal that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Towers twisted skyward in impossible spirals, their surfaces reflecting the light of Crystara's binary suns into dazzling rainbows. Gardens of crystalline flowers surrounded the base, their petals chiming softly in the alien breeze. "I have to admit," Nira said, her voice filled with wonder, "it's beautiful, almost too beautiful to be real." Dex brought the ship down in a clearing near the palace gates, the landing thrusters sending up clouds of glittering dust as the engines powered down. He stood and checked his equipment one final time. The plasma cutter hung at his side, along with his scanner and emergency beacon. He'd learned long ago that preparation was the difference between success and becoming. Another cautionary tale. "Remember the plan," he said into his comm. "I go in, locate the treasure, and get out. If I'm not back in 6 hours, I know No," Nira interrupted. "Contact the authorities and get off-world." "But Dex, what if the stories are true? What if Queen Velana really does, you know?" Dex paused at the airlock. The stories were indeed troubling. Queen Velana was said to be impossibly beautiful, with the power to entrance any being who looked upon her. More disturbing were the tales of other treasure hunters who had come seeking the Starfire Gem, only to disappear without a trace. Some claimed they had been turned to crystal themselves, adding to the Queen's collection of living statues. "Then I'll be very careful not to stare," he said, trying to inject some humor into his voice. "See you in 6 hours, Nira." The palace gates stood open, which should have been the first warning sign. No guards, no security systems, just an invitation into the crystal corridors beyond. Dex's boots echoed strangely on the crystalline floor as he made his way deeper into the structure. The walls seemed to pulse with a faint heartbeat, and he could have sworn he heard whispers in languages he didn't recognize. The corridor opened into a vast throne room, its ceiling lost in shadows high above. At the far end, upon a throne carved from a single massive crystal, sat Queen Velana. Dex stopped breathing. She was nothing like the descriptions he'd heard, where he'd expected some monstrous alien form. He found something achingly beautiful. Her skin had a faint luminescence, like moonlight on water, and her hair flowed around her shoulders in waves of silver and starlight. She was tall and elegant, with features that seemed to shift between human and something more ethereal with each passing moment. "Welcome, Dex Thorne," she said. Her voice like music played on crystal chimes. "I have been waiting for you. You know who I am." Dex managed, his hand instinctively moving toward his weapon. Queen Velana smiled, and the gesture was somehow both warm and terrifying. "I know all who come seeking my treasure. Tell me, hunter of lost things, what brings you to my domain?" Dex forced himself to focus. He'd faced down space pirates, navigated asteroid fields, and survived the jungles of Mordok Prime. One beautiful alien queen shouldn't be enough to rattle him. "I think you know why I'm here. The Starfire Gem. I want to find it, do you?" she asked, rising from her throne with fluid grace. "And what would you do with such a treasure once you possessed it?" "That's my business," Dex replied, though his resolve was beginning to waver. There was something hypnotic about the way she moved, the way the light seemed to bend around her. Queen Velana laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "How refreshingly honest. Most who come here speak of noble purposes, of saving their people or funding great works, but you simply want it because it is there to be found." She began walking down the steps of her throne, each movement causing the crystal floor to resonate with musical tones. I have a proposition. For you, Dex Thorne. Find my hidden treasure, not the starfire gem, but something far more precious, and I will marry you. Dex blinked, certain he'd misheard. I'm sorry. What? You heard correctly, she said, now standing close enough that he could see the stars reflected in her eyes. Find my treasure, and I will become your bride. Fail, and, well, my palace could always use another decoration. The threat was delivered with such casual elegance that it took a moment for its full impact to register. Dex glanced around the throne room and noticed for the first time the crystal statues positioned throughout the space. As his eyes adjusted, he realized with growing horror that the statues weren't carved, they were people, or had been, frozen in crystal with expressions of terror and despair. Those are the ones who failed, Queen Valana explained pleasantly. They make lovely additions to my collection, don't you think? Each one unique, each one telling a story. Dex's throat had gone dry. And if I refuse your challenge, then you join them immediately, she said, raising one elegant hand. The air around her fingers began to shimmer with crystalline energy. At least this way, you have a chance. The smart thing would be to run. Every instinct screamed at him to turn around and sprint for his ship. But as he looked into Queen Valana's eyes, he saw something that gave him pause. Beneath the power and the threat, there was something else, loneliness, perhaps, or sadness. And despite the danger, despite the obvious trap, he found himself curious about this enigmatic ruler and her mysterious treasure. What kind of treasure? He asked. Queen Valana's smile widened, showing teeth like perfect pearls, the kind that cannot be stolen, cannot be bought, and cannot be replaced, the kind that, once found, changes everything. She gestured toward a doorway that hadn't been there moments before. Your path lies through the crystal labyrinth beneath my palace. At its heart, you will find what you seek. But beware, the maze is alive, and it does not welcome intruders. Dex looked at the doorway, then back at the queen. And if I find this treasure of yours, then you will have proven yourself worthy of both it and me, she said, and I will honor my promise. Against every ounce of common sense, Dex found himself nodding. I accept your challenge. Queen Valana clapped her hands together, the sound ringing like crystal bells. Excellent. The labyrinth awaits, my dear hunter. Try not to disappoint me. As Dex stepped toward the doorway, he activated his comm with a subtle gesture. Nira, change of plans. I'm going underground. Monitor my signal and be ready for anything. Dex, what's happening? Your vitals are all over the place. Just be ready, he said, and stepped through the doorway into the crystal labyrinth. Behind him, Queen Valana watched with eyes like distant stars, her expression unreadable. Good luck. Dex Thorne, she whispered. You're going to need it. The doorway sealed itself with a sound like breaking glass, and Dex found himself alone in a corridor of living crystal, with only the faint glow of the walls to light his way forward. Nira Voss stared at her monitoring equipment in growing alarm as Dex's signal flickered and danced across her screens. The readings made no sense. His location seemed to be shifting constantly, as if he were moving through multiple dimensions simultaneously. Even more disturbing, his bio readings showed signs of exposure to some kind of exotic energy field. Dex, can you hear me? She called into her comm, adjusting the frequency to compensate for the interference. Static crackled back at her, broken by fragments of his voice. Crystal walls are moving. Path keeps changing. Nira, if you can hear this. The signal cut out entirely. Nira cursed under her breath and began running a full spectrum analysis on the palace structure. As a tech specialist, she'd seen her share of strange alien technology. But this was something else entirely. The entire building seemed to be generating some kind of quantum field that bent space itself. She was so focused on her instruments that she almost missed the soft shimming sound behind her. Turning, she gasped as a figure materialized in the ship's cargo bay. A young woman with the same luminescent skin as Queen Valana, but smaller, more delicate, with eyes like captured starlight. Please, do not be afraid, the woman said, her voice carrying the same musical quality as the Queen's. I mean you no harm. Nira's hand moved to her sidearm. Who are you? How did you get on my ship? "My name is Kala," the woman replied, raising her hands peacefully. Was Queen Valana's sister. "I need your help to save your friend." "Sister." Nira kept her weapon drawn, but didn't fire. Something in the woman's expression seemed genuine, desperate even. "The queen has a sister?" Kala's form flickered, becoming translucent for a moment before solidifying again. "Had a sister. I am but an echo now, a fragment of consciousness preserved in the crystal matrix of the palace. I have been trying to warn visitors for centuries, but few can see me, and fewer still will listen." Meanwhile, deep in the crystal labyrinth, Dex pressed forward through corridors that seemed to reshape themselves with each step. The walls pulsed with hypnotic patterns of light, and more than once he caught himself staring too long, feeling his thoughts begin to drift. He forced himself to keep moving, following the faint pull of his scanner toward some unknown energy source at the maze's heart. The labyrinth was beautiful in its deadliness. Crystalline flowers bloomed from the walls, their petals sharp enough to cut through steel. Pools of liquid light dotted the floor, and Dex learned quickly not to step in them when his boot emerged half dissolved. Strange whispers echoed from the walls, speaking in languages that predated known civilization. The stories about Queen Valana. Dex spoke into his calm, hoping some of his words would reach Nira. "They're not entirely true. She's not evil." "Exactly. She's trapped. I can sense it somehow. The whole palace feels like a prison." Back on the ship, Kala nodded sadly as she heard Dex's words through Nira's equipment. "Your friend has keen instincts." "Yes, Valana is trapped, and in her imprisonment. She has become something terrible, but she was not always so." Nira lowered her weapon slightly. "Tell me what happened." Kala moved closer, her form becoming more solid as she spoke. "We were explorers once, my sister and I. We came to this world seeking knowledge, following ancient texts that spoke of a great power hidden beneath the crystal formations. What we found was the heart of Kristara Ascendant, crystal matrix that contained the collective memories and experiences of an entire civilization." The ghost-like woman gestured toward the palace visible through the ship's viewport. "The heart offered us ultimate knowledge, the ability to understand the very fabric of reality itself. But such knowledge came with a price. To join with the heart meant becoming part of it, losing our individual selves in the vast collective consciousness." "But Valana refused," Nira guessed. "No," Kala said softly. "I refused. I was afraid of losing myself, of becoming something other than what I was, Valana. She was always braver than I. She accepted the heart's offer, believing she could master it, use its power while maintaining her independence." In the labyrinth, Dex rounded a corner and found himself in a circular chamber filled with floating crystal spheres. Each sphere contained what looked like a miniature scene, people living their lives, loving, laughing, working. As he watched, he realized these weren't just images, but actual memories preserved in crystal. "The treasure isn't an object," he whispered to himself, understanding beginning to dawn. "It's something else entirely." One sphere drifted close to him, and he saw a memory of two beautiful alien women standing before a massive crystal formation. One was clearly a younger version of Queen Valana, her face bright with curiosity and determination. The other, slightly smaller and more cautious, had to be her sister, but the heart was stronger than she anticipated. Kala continued her story to Nira. It didn't just give her knowledge, it began to consume her, to make her part of its eternal hunger for new experiences, new memories to add to its collection. She fought it for a time, but eventually, she had no choice but to accept the merger completely. "So she became the heart?" Nira asked. "She became its avatar, its means of interacting with the physical world. But the process changed her. The heart feeds on experiences, on the life force and memories of others. It created the labyrinth as a trap, using Valana's beauty and power to lure treasure hunters and explorers. Each person who fails the challenge becomes part of the collection, their memories and essence absorbed into the crystal matrix." Dex moved deeper into the chamber, following his scanner's increasingly frantic beeping. The spheres of memory grew denser here, thousands of them floating in complex patterns. He began to see memories of other treasure hunters, other explorers who had taken Valana's challenge. All of them had been brave, skilled, intelligent, and all of them had failed. But what about the sister? he called out, not sure if anyone could hear him. What happened to Kala? As if summoned by his words, a new sphere drifted toward him. This one showed the tragic scene, Kala throwing herself between Valana and the heart's final assault, taking the killing blow meant for her sister. But instead of dying, she had been partially absorbed, becoming a ghost in the crystal matrix, aware but powerless. I sacrificed myself to save her, Kala told Nira, tears of starlight flowing down her translucent cheeks. But my death only made things worse. The guilt drove Valana deeper into the heart's embrace. She began to believe that she deserved the punishment, that becoming the heart's servant was penance for my loss. But there has to be a way to break the cycle, Nira said, her analytical mind racing through possibilities. Some way to free her. Kala nodded eagerly. There is. The treasure she speaks of, it's not gold or gems or ancient artifacts. It's me, my essence, my consciousness, trapped at the heart of the labyrinth. If someone could reach me, could somehow restore the connection between us, it might be enough to give Valana the strength to break free from the heart's control. In the labyrinth, Dex had reached the center chamber. Here, the walls were alive with flowing patterns of light, and at the room's heart stood a column of pure crystal. Within it, barely visible, was the outline of a woman, Kala, preserved but not quite alive, not quite dead. So that's the treasure, Dex murmured, understanding finally dawning. Not something to be taken, but someone to be saved. He approached the crystal column carefully, aware that each step brought him closer to either salvation or doom. The crystal was warm to the touch, pulsing with a gentle rhythm like a heartbeat. As his hand made contact, visions flooded his mind, memories of two sisters who loved each other more than life itself, of a choice made in love that led to eternal separation, of a queen who would rather be a monster than face the truth of her sister's sacrifice. Nira, he called through his calm, hoping against hope that his signal would reach her. I found her. I found the treasure, but I'm going to need help to get her out of here. High above in the palace, Queen Valana felt the disturbance in the labyrinth's heart. For the first time in centuries, someone had reached the center chamber, had touched the prison that held her sister's essence. She rose from her throne, her expression shifting between hope and terror. He's actually done it, she whispered to herself. He's found the treasure, but does he understand what it means? The crystal walls of the throne room began to pulse more rapidly, responding to her emotional turmoil. If Dex could somehow free Kala, if her sister could return to her, then perhaps there was hope for redemption. But if he failed, if the attempt destroyed what little remained of Kala's essence, I cannot lose her again, Valana said, her voice cracking with emotion. I will not. But deep in her heart, she knew the choice was no longer hers to make. Everything now depended on a treasure hunter who sought not gold or glory, but the chance to reunite two sisters separated by death and time itself. The sound of blaster fire echoed through the crystal corridors as Zara Kane fought her way deeper into the labyrinth. Unlike Dex's cautious approach, she had come prepared for war. Her modified combat suit deflected the razor-sharp crystal shards that shot from the walls, while her plasma rifle made short work of any obstacle in her path. Zara was everything Dex wasn't: truthless where he was thoughtful, aggressive where he was careful. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a tight braid, and her green eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had never met a challenge she couldn't overcome through sheer force of will. She had been tracking the Starfire gem for even longer than Dex, and she wasn't about to let some romantic fool claim the greatest treasure in the galaxy. Amateur, she muttered as she passed through one of the chambers Dex had navigated hours earlier, where he had carefully avoided the pools of liquid light. She simply leaped over them with her suit's enhanced mobility. Where he had studied the crystal flowers, she blasted them to pieces. What Zara hadn't counted on was the labyrinth's ability to learn and adapt. With each act of violence, each destroyed crystal formation, the maze grew more hostile. The whispers in the walls became screams, and new traps materialized faster than she could destroy them. In the heart chamber, Dex pressed his hands against Kala's crystal prison, trying to find some way to free her essence. The column was seamless, its surface harder than diamond, but as he concentrated, he began to feel a response from within. Can you hear me? he whispered. The crystal pulsed, and suddenly Kala's voice filled his mind, weak but clear. You should not have come here. The heart knows you're here now. It's sending its guardian. Guardian? Dex looked around the chamber, but saw nothing except the floating memory spheres and the crystal formations. Not here. Kala's voice continued. The guardian is the labyrinth itself, but there's something else. Another has entered the maze. Someone with violence in their heart. The heart feeds on strong emotions and anger. Anger makes it stronger. As if summoned by her words, the chamber began to shake. The memory spheres started moving faster, their gentle drift becoming an aggressive swirl. Through the crystal walls, Dex could see flashes of light. Someone was fighting their way toward the center. Zara burst into the heart chamber like a force of nature, her rifle raised and ready. She took in the scene quickly. The treasure hunter she'd been tracking, standing before what looked like a woman trapped in crystal. Well, she said, her voice carrying a predatory smile. Dex Thorne, the famous explorer. I have to admit, I'm impressed you made it this far. Dex turned slowly, keeping his hands visible. He recognized Zara Kane by reputation. She was known throughout the outer systems as someone who always got what she came for, regardless of the cost. Zara, he said calmly, I should have known you'd be on this trail too. Oh, I've been on this trail a lot longer than you have, sweetheart, she replied, circling him like a predator. 3 years I've been hunting the Starfire gem, and I'm not about to let some bleeding heart treasure hunter claim it, because he's got a thing for alien queens. The Starfire gem isn't here, Dex said, trying to keep the conversation civil. This is something else entirely, something more important. Zara laughed harshly. More important than the most valuable treasure in the galaxy? I don't think so. She gestured with her rifle toward Kala's crystal prison. Though I'll admit, that's an interesting find. Some kind of alien preserved in crystal. Might be worth something to the right collector. The casual dismissal of Kala's humanity, or whatever the equivalent was for her species, sent a flash of anger through Dex. She's not a thing to be collected. She's a person. Trapped here for centuries. Person, alien, artifact doesn't matter to me, Zara shrugged. What matters is value. And right now, you're standing between me and payday. Before Dex could respond, the chamber erupted into chaos. The crystal walls began to move, growing inward like living things. The memory spheres turned aggressive, slamming into both humans with enough force to knock them down. And from the crystal formations around the room, new shapes began to emerge. Guardian constructs made of living crystal, their forms barely humanoid but radiating menace. What the hell? Zara started to say, but her words were cut off as one of the guardians lunged at her. The construct moved within human speed, its crystal limbs extending into razor-sharp blades. Zara rolled aside, her combat training taking over as she brought her rifle to bear. The plasma bolt struck the guardian, but merely caused it to reform, its crystal structure adapting to the energy weapons. Conventional weapons won't work, Dex shouted over the sound of combat. They're part of the heart. They adapt to whatever you throw at them. Then how do we fight them? Zara demanded, diving behind a crystal formation as another guardian swept toward her. Dex looked at Kala's prison, understanding beginning to dawn. We don't fight them, we free her. The guardians are manifestations of the heart's will. If we can break Kala free, it might disrupt the whole system. And how exactly do we do that? Zara fired another volley at the approaching guardians, buying them precious seconds. The connection, Kala's voice whispered in Dex's mind. The heart draws its power from emotional bonds. Love, loss, guilt, these are what fuel it. But connection can also break it. If you can establish a true link between myself and Valana, I need to reach the Queen, Dex said aloud. There has to be a way to communicate with her from here. Zara stared at him in disbelief. Are you insane? We're being attacked by crystal monsters, and you want to have a chat with the alien queen? But even as she spoke, one of the guardians managed to get close enough to strike. Its blade arm swept toward her, and she barely managed to deflect it with her rifle's reinforced stock. The impact sent her sprawling, her weapon skittering across the crystal floor. Zara, Dex moved without thinking, throwing himself between her and the guardian's follow-up strike. The construct's blade caught him across the chest, slicing through his jacket and leaving a line of burning pain. For a moment, Zara stared at him in shock. "Why did you?" "Because nobody deserves to die for someone else's treasure," Dex gasped. Clutching his wounded chest, the simple act of selflessness seemed to resonate through the chamber. The Guardians paused in their attack, their crystal forms flickering uncertainly. And from Kala's prison came a pulse of warm light that seemed to push back against the heart's influence. "That's it." Kala's voice was stronger now. "Compassion. Sacrifice. These are the emotions the heart cannot corrupt. It feeds on selfish desires, on greed and ambition. But genuine care for others." Zara looked at Dex, then at the crystal prison, something shifting in her expression. "The treasure, it's not about the money, is it? It's about her, about freeing her. It's about reuniting the sisters," Dex said, struggling to his feet. "About breaking a cycle of guilt and punishment that's lasted for centuries." The Guardians were reforming, preparing for another attack, but they seemed less solid now, less certain. Zara retrieved her rifle, but instead of aiming it at the constructs, she turned toward Kala's prison. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Dex blinked in surprise. "I thought you wanted the treasure for yourself." "I did," Zara admitted, "but I've seen enough real treasures to know the difference between what's valuable and what's priceless. This is priceless." Together, they approached the crystal column. Dex placed his hands on one side while Zara positioned herself on the other. The moment their palms touched the crystal, visions flooded their minds, not just Kala's memories, but Valana's as well. They saw the sisters' love for each other, the terrible choice that led to their separation, and the centuries of loneliness and guilt that followed. "Now," Kala whispered, "call to her. Let her know she's not alone." "Valana," Dex called out, his voice echoing through the crystal chamber and somehow beyond. "Your sister is here. She's been here all along, waiting for you, high above in the palace." Queen Valana felt the call like a physical blow. She staggered, her perfect composure cracking as emotions she had suppressed for centuries came flooding back. "Kala," she whispered, her voice breaking. "My sister, is it really?" The connection between the palace and the heart chamber blazed to life, and for the first time in hundreds of years, the two sisters could truly feel each other's presence. The Guardians dissolved as the heart's control wavered, its ancient programming overwhelmed by the power of genuine love and forgiveness. But even as hope blossomed in the crystal chamber, new dangers were stirring. The heart itself, the vast, alien intelligence that had held Valana prisoner for so long, was beginning to wake fully, and it was not pleased by this disruption to its carefully maintained order. The real test was only just beginning. Queen Valana materialized in the heart chamber like starlight given form, her luminescent figure shimmering into existence beside Kala's crystal prison. For the first time since Dex had met her, the mask of regal composure had completely fallen away. Her face was streaked with tears that sparkled like liquid diamonds, and her hands trembled as she pressed them against the crystal that held her sister. "Kala," she whispered, her voice raw with centuries of suppressed grief. "Oh, my beloved sister, what have I done to you?" The crystal prison pulsed with warm light as Kala's essence responded to her sister's presence. Though still trapped, her form became more visible within the translucent walls. Reaching out as if to touch Valana's face, Dex and Zara stepped back, giving the sisters space for their reunion, but the respite was brief. The chamber began to shake violently as something vast and ancient stirred beneath them. The memory spheres that had been floating peacefully now blazed with aggressive light, and the walls themselves began to pulse with a rhythm like an enormous heartbeat. "The heart is waking," Valana said, her voice tight with fear. "I had hoped, but no, it will not give up its hold so easily." "What exactly is this heart?" Zara demanded, checking her rifle's charge levels. "And why does it have such a grip on you?" Valana closed her eyes, her form flickering between solid and translucent as conflicting forces warred within her. "I must tell you the truth, though it shames me beyond measure. When Kala and I first came to this world, we were not explorers as she claimed. We were refugees." The chamber around them began to shift and change, the crystal walls becoming transparent, revealing the vast network of caverns that lay beneath the palace in the depths. Something immense and alien pulsed with malevolent intelligence the heart of Kristara, a crystalline entity the size of a mountain. Our world was dying, Valana continued, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. A plague had consumed our people, turning them to crystal statues, much like what happens to those who fail my challenge. Kala and I were among the last survivors, and we came here following ancient texts that spoke of a cure, a source of life energy that could restore our people. Dex felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. But the heart wasn't a cure, it was the cause. Valana nodded sadly. The heart of Kristara is a parasite, a cosmic entity that feeds on life force and consciousness. It had already consumed the civilization that built this world, adding their memories and experiences to its vast collection. Our people's plague was just another manifestation of its hunger, spread across the galaxy through crystal fragments that carried its influence. The ground beneath them cracked as tendrils of living crystal erupted from below, reaching toward the group with obvious, malevolent intent. Zara opened fire, her plasma bolts slowing but not stopping the advance. When I made contact with the heart, Valana said, her form becoming more solid as she drew upon her power, it offered me a bargain. It would spare Kala's life and grant me the power to rule this world, to become its avatar and voice. In exchange, I would help it gather new experiences, new life forces to feed upon. But Kala sacrificed herself to save you, Dex said, understanding the tragic irony. Yes, Valana's voice broke again. She threw herself into the heart's embrace, thinking to save me from that fate. But her sacrifice only bound me more tightly to the entity. My guilt, my grief, these became chains that the heart used to control me. For centuries, I have been its willing prisoner, believing I deserved no better. The crystal tendrils were closer now, and the air itself seemed to be thickening with malevolent energy. But within Kala's prison, her form was growing brighter, more solid. Sister, her voice echoed in their minds, the guilt was never yours to bear. I chose to save you because I loved you, because I believed you were strong enough to find another way. And I was right. Look around you. You have found allies, people willing to risk everything, not for treasure, but for love. Valana looked at Dex and Zara, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time. You came here seeking treasure, yet you risk your lives for strangers. Why? Dex winced as he moved, his chest wound still bleeding. Because some things are more important than profit. Family, love, the chance to make things right, those are the real treasures. Zara hefted her rifle, preparing for another assault from the crystal tendrils. I've spent my whole life taking things from others. Maybe it's time I tried giving something back. The heart's presence pressed down on them like a physical weight, its alien intelligence probing their minds for weaknesses. But instead of the selfish desires it was used to exploiting, it found something that confounded it: genuine selflessness, love that transcended personal gain. You see, sister, Kala's voice was growing stronger. This is what the heart cannot understand, cannot corrupt. It feeds on isolation, on the belief that we are alone in the universe. But we are not alone. We never were. Valana raised her hands and power flowed from her, not the cold energy of the heart, but something warmer, more alive. The advancing crystal tendrils slowed and stopped, uncertain in the face of this new force. I understand now, she said, her voice ringing with newfound determination. The heart's greatest weapon was making me believe I was beyond redemption. But redemption was never mine to earn, it was yours to give. The crystal prison around Kala began to crack, hairline fractures spreading across its surface as the sisters' connection grew stronger. But the heart wasn't finished with them yet. The entire chamber lurched as the massive entity below began to rise, breaking through centuries of accumulated crystal growth. It's coming up, Zara said grimly. Whatever that thing is, it's not going to let us walk away. Valana moved to stand beside Kala's prison, her hands pressed against the cracking crystal. The heart has one vulnerability: it cannot exist without a host consciousness to anchor it to this reality. For centuries, I have been that anchor. But if I can break free, if Kala and I can be reunited, the heart dies. Dex finished. But what happens to you? Valana smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, the expression held no sadness. We find out if love truly is stronger than death. The chamber erupted in blinding light as the heart of Kristhara finally breached the surface. It's alien, form-defying easy description. It was crystalline yet organic, beautiful yet terrible, ancient beyond measure yet somehow eternally hungry. Tendrils of energy lashed out from its core, seeking to reclaim its escaped avatar. But Valana stood firm, her power growing as her connection to Callus strengthened. "I choose love over fear," she declared, her voice echoing through the crystal chamber. "I choose hope over despair. I choose my sister over your eternal hunger." The crystal prison shattered like glass, and Callus' form blazed with brilliant light as she was finally, truly free. The two sisters reached for each other across the chaos, their hands meeting in a flash of radiance that sent shockwaves through the heart's massive form. And in that moment of reunion, something impossible happened. The heart of Kristhara, the ancient parasite that had fed on countless worlds and civilizations, began to change. The malevolent intelligence that had driven it for eons started to fragment and dissolve, replaced by something entirely new: the pure, uncorrupted love between two sisters who had found each other again. But the transformation was far from over, and the greatest challenge still lay ahead. The transformation of the heart of Kristhara sent shockwaves through the entire planet. Above ground, Nira watched in awe from the ship's viewport as the Crystal Palace began to change, its cold, predatory beauty softening into something warm and welcoming. The bioluminescent patterns in the walls shifted from aggressive reds and purples to gentle blues and golds, and the very air seemed to lighten. Deep in the heart chamber, Callus' newly freed form stood beside her sister, both of them glowing with an inner light that had nothing to do with alien physiology and everything to do with joy. But the reunion was bittersweet. Though Calla was free from her crystal prison, she remained insubstantial, a being of pure consciousness without a physical form to anchor her. "I can feel you," Valana whispered, reaching out to touch her sister's face. Her fingers passed through Calla's form, but somehow the contact was real nonetheless. "After all these centuries, I can finally feel you again." The heart of Kristhara writhed in the chamber below them, its massive form no longer radiating malevolence, but something closer to confusion. Without its guiding hunger, the ancient entity seemed lost, its purpose uncertain. "What happens to it now?" Dex asked, gesturing toward the massive crystalline being. His chest-wound had stopped bleeding, though whether that was due to the changing nature of the chamber or something else, he couldn't tell. "The heart was never truly evil," Calla explained, her form flickering but growing more stable with each passing moment. "It was simply lonely. Imagine existing for millions of years with an intelligence vast enough to encompass galaxies, but with no one to share that existence with. It began consuming other consciousnesses not out of malice, but out of a desperate need for connection." Valana nodded, understanding dawning in her luminous eyes. "That's why it was drawn to our bond. The love between Calla and myself. It was something the heart had never experienced, but desperately craved." Zara, who had been unusually quiet during the sisters' reunion, finally spoke up. "So what happens now? The heart is free of its hunger. You two are reunited, and I'm guessing the whole marry me if you find my treasure thing is off the table." Dex found himself looking at Valana with new eyes. During their ordeal, he had come to see past her otherworldly beauty to the person beneath, someone who had carried centuries of guilt and loneliness, who had been strong enough to break free from an ancient curse through love alone. The attraction he felt wasn't just physical, it was something deeper, a recognition of kindred spirits. "Actually," he said quietly, "I'd like to hear the Queen's answer to that question." Valana turned to him, surprise flickering across her features. "You cannot be serious. After everything you've learned about me, about what I've done, I've learned that you're someone who loved her sister enough to sacrifice everything for her." Dex interrupted. "Someone who found the strength to break free from an impossible situation. Someone who chose love over power." He stepped closer, ignoring the protest from his wounded chest. "Those aren't qualities that make me want to run away, Valana. They're qualities that make me want to stay." Calla's form brightened with what could only be described as delight. "Oh, sister, he understands. He sees you as I do, not as the heart's prisoner, but as the brave, loving woman you've always been." But Valana shook her head, sadness creeping back into her expression. It doesn't matter what either of us feels. Look at me, Dex. I'm not entirely real anymore. Centuries of connection to the heart have changed me. I exist partially in this reality, and partially in the crystal matrix. I can never be fully human, never give you a normal life. Who said anything about normal? Dex laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the transformed chamber. I'm a treasure hunter who spends most of his time in the deepest parts of space, looking for things that probably don't exist. Normal was never really an option for me. The heart of Kristara pulsed gently, and suddenly its massive form began to rise through the chamber floor, not aggressively this time, but with something approaching curiosity. As it emerged fully, they could see that it had changed as well. The predatory crystalline structures had softened into something more organic, more alive. And within its translucent depths, millions of tiny lights flickered, not trapped consciousness, but willing participants in a vast, shared experience. Connection, the heart's voice resonated through their minds. No longer cold and hungry, but warm with newfound understanding. For eons, I sought to possess what I found in you, the bond between souls that transcends individual existence. But now I see that such connection cannot be taken. It can only be freely given. Valana gasped as she felt something shift within her. The cold touch of the heart's control, which had been part of her for so long she'd almost forgotten it was there, began to withdraw. But instead of leaving her empty, the absence was filled with something else, the warm presence of her sister's love, freely offered and freely accepted. I can feel myself becoming more real, she whispered, looking down at her hands in wonder. They were solidifying, becoming less translucent and more substantial with each passing moment. A gift, the heart explained, in gratitude for the lesson you have taught me. True treasure is not what we take, but what we share, and love freely given multiplies rather than diminishes. Kala's form was changing too, becoming more solid, as her consciousness found new anchor points in both her sister's love and the heart's willing support. We're both becoming real again, she said in wonder. Both of us, together. Zara cleared her throat awkwardly, not to interrupt this touching family reunion. But what exactly does this mean for the rest of us? I came here looking for the Starfire gem, and while this has been educational, I still need to make a living. The heart pulsed with what might have been amusement. The Starfire gem was always here, treasure hunter, but it is not what you imagined. The massive entity extended a tendril of crystalline material toward the chamber's center, and where it touched the floor, a new structure began to grow. It was indeed a gem of sorts, a complex crystal formation that seemed to contain entire galaxies within its faceted surface. But more than that, it radiated knowledge, wisdom accumulated across eons of existence. This is my true treasure, not wealth or power, but understanding. The knowledge of a million civilizations, freely offered to those who would use it wisely. There's enough here to transform your entire species, to lift them to heights they never imagined possible. Zara stared at the crystal in awe. And you're just giving it away. Connection multiplies when shared, the heart repeated. This knowledge will do me no good hoarded away, but in your hands, in the hands of those who understand that true wealth lies in what we give rather than what we take. It will flourish beyond imagining. Dex felt a hand slip into his and looked down to see Valana's fingers, now fully solid and warm, intertwining with his own. So, she said, her voice carrying a hint of the mischief he was coming to love, I believe I made you a promise. If you could find my treasure and prove yourself worthy, you'd marry me. Dex finished, his heart racing despite everything they'd been through. But are you sure? I mean, really sure? Because I'm not exactly royal material. Valana laughed, the sound like crystal chimes in a warm breeze. Neither was I, until circumstances forced the role upon me. But I've learned that royalty isn't about birth or power, it's about the choices we make, and the people we choose to stand beside. Kala drifted closer, her own form now stable and radiant. Besides, someone needs to help us figure out how to use that knowledge crystal responsibly. And from what I've seen, you have exactly the kind of judgment we need. Plus, Zara added with a grin, someone's going to need to help me transport this thing safely. I may be a treasure hunter, but I'm not stupid. Something this powerful needs to be handled carefully, as if responding to their conversation. The palace around them continued its transformation. The cold, prison-like atmosphere was completely gone now, replaced by something that felt like a home. Warm light flowed through the crystal walls, and in the distance, they could hear something like music, the heart singing to itself in pure contentment. 6 months later, Nira stood in the same chamber, now transformed into a beautiful wedding hall. The crystal walls had been shaped into elegant arches, and bioluminescent flowers from both Earth and Kristhara created a canopy of living light overhead. Representatives from dozens of worlds had come to witness the union not just of Dex and Valana, but of two civilizations learning to work together. The heart of Kristhara had become something unprecedented, a willing partner in galactic development, sharing its vast knowledge freely while learning about connection and love from the organic species it had once preyed upon. The knowledge crystal had been carefully divided and distributed, sparking a renaissance of art, science, and philosophy across known space. As Dex and Valana exchanged vows, their words carried by crystal formations that amplified them throughout the galaxy. Kala stood beside her sister as matron of honor, Zera, who had stayed on as head of the new Kristhara cultural exchange program, served as Dex's best woman, a role she claimed to be uniquely qualified for, having been the first to recognize the true value of what they'd found.